how far would you actually go, to settle the age-old debate about whether men or women have it easier?
Right. I mean, it's the ultimate hypothetical scenario. Most of us just sort of argue these points from our own deeply entrenched positions.
Exactly. Like, if you really wanted to know the absolute truth, would you just read a bunch of sociological studies? Or would you conduct surveys? Or would you take it a massive step further?
Most people would stop at the surveys.
Right. But would you be willing to completely change your physical identity, walk out your front door, and literally live entirely on the other side of the gender divide?
It's wild to even think about because we naturally assume we understand the daily reality of the other side just based on our interactions with them. But the critical flaw there is we are always observing from the outside.
Yeah, we never actually crossed the border to see how the other half lives when we aren't in the room. But somebody actually did it.
Which is just incredible.
It is. Today's deep dive is all about a journalist named Norah Vincent, who took that hypothetical question and turned it into an 18-month reality.
A massive commitment.
Truly. So Vincent was a self-described tomboy. She was a lesbian living in Manhattan, and she was haunted by this pervasive cultural idea that women generally believe men have always had it better in every conceivable way.
Right, the classic men have it easy narrative.
Exactly. And to find out if that was true, she didn't just interview men. She went deep undercover as a man named Med. And she wrote a groundbreaking book about the entire experience called Self-Made Man.
So, okay, let's unpack this because the sheer audacity of this project is just mind-blowing.
The commitment is staggering, honestly. But before we get into the actual mechanics of how she did it, I really want to establish our parameters for this discussion.
Good idea.
Because we are not here to take sides in any modern cultural gender wars. Our role today is to act purely as impartial guides to Vincent's lived experience. What's fascinating here is that we shouldn't view this book as a political statement or, a partisan argument.
Right, it's not about point scoring. Exactly. It is, at its absolute core, a profound psychological experiment about human empathy. I mean, it's essentially a masterclass in radical perspective taking.
And taking on that perspective required a massive physical transformation. Like, before she could even attempt to understand men, she literally had to build one.
Yeah, it wasn't just throwing on a baggy flannel and a baseball cap.
Oh, no. Not just lowering her voice an octave, either. The physical and psychological preparation was painstaking. We have to look at her baseline first. So she was 5'10", about 155 pounds.
So she already had the foundation to pass as a medium-build man.
Right. The canvas was certainly there, but the details required immense dedication.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she started with a strict buzz cut to emphasize a squarer jawline. And then she wore a sports bra that was specifically sized way too small.
Just to flatten her chest.
Right, which actually restricted her breathing on a daily basis. And she even wore a prosthetic piece and a jockstrap just to change her center of gravity and alter how she walked in those baggy men's clothes.
Wow. But the facial hair is what really gets me.
The stubble.
Yeah. She actually hired a professional makeup artist who created this highly credible 5 o'clock shadow. And they achieved this by painstakingly gluing synthetic hair clippings directly to her face.
That sounds miserable.
She said it was incredibly uncomfortable. When she started sweating, the glue would mix with the perspiration and would cause the skin on her face to itch and burn constantly.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was this visceral daily reminder of the mask she was actually wearing.
And that physical discomfort perfectly mirrors the psychological discomfort she was about to endure. But, the vocal training is perhaps the most revealing mechanism of the entire transformation.
Oh, right, with the Juilliard coach.
Yes. She spent months working with a Juilliard voice teacher named Kate Murray. And Murray taught her a fundamental difference in how men and women physically produce sound. Women naturally tend to have stronger nasal resonance.
And they often use inflection that goes up at the end of a sentence, right?
Yeah,
like subtly seeking agreement or permission.
Exactly. So to sound like a man, Vincent had to completely unlearn her natural speech patterns. She had to learn to push the sound down into her chest cavity.
She had to project with what her coach called terse authority.
Terse authority is such a great phrase.
I love that phrase so much because it already hints at the social expectations placed on men. Speak less, eliminate the apologies from your vocabulary, don't seek permission, and just speak with absolute confidence from the chest.
It's an entirely different way of taking up space.
Right, so she has the look, she has the physical pain of the disguise, she has the voice, but the psychological prep is just wild. Over the 18 months, she estimates she dressed as Ned, roughly 150 times.
That's a lot of repetitions.
Makes me think of like a spy preparing for a deep cover espionage mission. You can't just wear the clothes, you have to embody the persona completely. And she described herself as having a serial killer's peeper skills and this highly analytical, detached outlook on life.
That self-awareness is key.
Yeah, so how crucial was that specific psychological detachment to surviving this physical transformation?
I mean, it was everything. If we connect this to the bigger picture of psychology, Vincent was utilizing what we'd call the undercover explorer archetype.
Okay, what does that entail?
Well, it requires immense psychological resilience and compartmentalization. Like you said, she wasn't just putting on a costume for a Halloween party. She had to actively suppress her natural reaction.
Like her instinct to smile, to diffuse tension.
Exactly. Her entire female socialization had to be suppressed, while simultaneously remaining hypervigilant to her surroundings. That self-described detachment, that sort of voyeur mentality, that was her primary defense
To
mechanism.
protect herself.
Right. It allowed her to observe a situation without immediately reacting emotionally, which is really the only way she could calculate how Ned was supposed to react in real time.
So with the disguise perfected, Ned has to actually walk out the front door and test this persona in the real world.
The scariest part.
Totally. Vincent specifically targeted stereotypical spaces where men congregate when women aren't around. And her first real test was a working-class bowling alley in Pennsylvania.
She was absolutely terrified.
Beyond terrified. She described walking into that male space as a woman feeling like walking into a gritty auto body shop or a traditional barber shop where every hair in your arms stands up because your instincts are just screaming that you don't belong there.
And that you're going to be found out. The anticipation of rejection was incredibly high for her. She walked in expecting harshness.
Yeah, she expected the men to instantly sniff out the imposter, interrogate her, and just ostracize her.
Because the societal narrative she carried was that groups of men are inherently exclusionary and aggressive.
But the reality was the exact opposite. She approaches a guy named Jim to join his bowling team, and he takes her in, no questions asked.
Just like that.
Just like that. And here's where it gets really interesting, because once she is accepted into the fold, she starts observing how these men actually interact with each other.
The real behind-the-scenes look.
Yeah, and it's all loud cussing, roughhousing, and constant good-natured ribbing.
Which can seem so jarring from the outside.
Exactly. As a woman observing from the outside, that behavior might look aggressive or mean-spirited. But as Ned, sitting inside the circle, she realized this was actually an unspoken, complex form of deep affection.
It's fascinating.
It really is. It's like male friendship in that space operates on a completely different frequency of light. It is entirely invisible to the female radar, but if you are tuned to that specific wavelength, it is radiating warmth.
That's a great analogy. We can conceptualize this dynamic through the archetype of the bowling buddy.
Okay, tell me about the bowling buddy.
Well, these men express their loyalty and their affection not through deep, probing emotional disclosures, but through shared action. Showing up every week, being reliable, sharing a physical activity.
And using humor and ribbing to bridge the interpersonal gap.
Exactly. They use banter to show they care without triggering the vulnerability that their social conditioning strictly forbids. Vincent was actually deeply moved by the profound generosity of these men.
And the ultimate proof of that generosity is what happens at the very end of the bowling season. The guilt of the deception is just eating at her, and she decides she has to tell Jim the truth.
A huge risk.
Huge! She takes him out for a drink, brings her female partner along, and nervously tells Jim she has something to confess that will completely blow his mind.
And how did he react?
Jim, in this incredible moment of nonchalance, says the only thing that would blow his mind is if she told him she was actually a girl and her partner was a guy.
Which is, of course, exactly what she tells him.
Right.
And Jim absorbs the information and simply accepts it. I mean, he didn't get angry about being lied to. He even noted later that he thought Vincent came into the project with some incredibly heavy, unfair misconceptions about men.
That single interaction just fundamentally shattered her preconceived idea of monolithic male hostility.
It proved that male spaces could be incredibly welcoming. But a bowling alley is a space built on shared activity and camaraderie.
Right, there's a purpose.
What happens when the space is purely transactional? That question drove her to test the disguise in a very different male arena.
The strip club. And wait, I'm really struggling with this part of her journey, because Vincent is a lesbian. She is genuinely attracted to women. Shouldn't a strip club have been the one place she actually enjoyed Why was she absolutely miserable there?
It's a great point, and it raises an important question about the vast difference between perceived power and internal emotional reality.
Okay, how so?
Well, society culturally frames the strip club as the ultimate arena of male dominance and female objectification. Vincent assumed she would tap into that revelry. She thought she'd have fun.
But you didn't.
No, she encountered what we might call the strip club patron archetype. She didn't find powerful men reveling in sexual freedom. Instead, she found an atmosphere thick with intense male loneliness.
Just profound sadness.
Exactly. These men were using the club as an avoidance coping mechanism. They were seeking a temporary release from the crushing performance pressures of their daily lives.
Because they can't show that stress anywhere else.
Right. Because genuine intimacy and emotional vulnerability are so heavily policed and punished in traditional masculinity, these men seek out transactional, one-sided interactions.
They pay for the illusion of desire without the risk of emotional rejection.
Which is an escape that ultimately just reinforces their profound isolation. The objectification of the women is certainly present, but Vincent realized it was deeply tangled up with the men's own desperate need for validation.
And their profound, unexpressed insecurity.
Exactly.
So these casual spaces revealed this hidden undercurrent of isolation. And that realization naturally led Vincent to investigate how this hidden male vulnerability interacts with women.
The dating scene.
Yeah, Ned steps into the high-stakes pressure cooker of the romantic dating market. Ned starts dating women. And Vincent assumed this would be a breeze because, hey, she knows what women want, right?
You'd think so.
But the reality was completely exhausting. She found the women she dated to be highly suspicious, bitter about past relationships with men, and just incredibly demanding.
Well, because she was passing flawlessly as a man, she suddenly became the recipient of women's defensive pessimism.
Defensive pessimism.
Yeah, the women she dated were projecting all their past hurts and frustrations onto Ned. They were constantly hyper-vigilant, basically testing him for signs of betrayal or incompetence.
Wow.
But more fundamentally, Vincent felt the overwhelming immediate weight of the traditional male role.
The expectation to instantly take charge. She described how the women expected Ned to plan the date, pay for the dinner, initiate the physical contact, and flawlessly lead the conversation.
All at once.
All while offering unwavering emotional support to a person who is viewing him with inherent suspicion. It's wild.
That is the immense burden of the provider role. The expectation is that the man must be this unbreakable pillar, and that immense pressure to provide and perform doesn't stop at the restaurant door.
No, it carries directly over into the workplace.
Which was her next arena. She takes a high-pressure, commission-based door-to-door sales job.
And this was a totally cutthroat environment. And she realizes that for these men on the sales floor, failure isn't just about missing a paycheck or having a bad day at the office.
It's much deeper than that.
The fear of failure drives them to absolute sweating desperation. Because in this hierarchical system, failing at work is a direct threat to their core identity.
Yes.
If you can't close the deal, if you can't provide, your societal value as a man just plummets to zero.
Success in that corporate environment isn't just about financial achievement. It is quite literally about psychological survival.
Yeah.
The workplace becomes this brutal proving ground where the rigid codes of masculinity are ruthlessly enforced by other men.
You have to be entirely self-reliant.
You must aggressively compete, and you must never, under any circumstances, show weakness or admit that you are struggling.
Which perfectly explains why her next stop was so devastating.
Yeah.
The inevitable crash from all this romantic and professional pressure leads men to seek help, which brings Ned to a men's therapy group. This was an Iron John-inspired male recovery retreat. And this is where the entire facade of male power truly crumbles. Vincent sits in this circle of men, and she has this massive revelation. Most men are living in disguise every single day of their lives.
Hiding in plain sight.
Yet they're constantly, exhaustingly hiding their pain, their shame, and their fear. She observed that society only allows men what she called a 3-note emotional range.
Just 3 notes.
Anger, pride, and amusement. That's it. Sadness, fear, and tenderness. Those are strictly forbidden.
And it creates a state of profound emotional starvation. The mechanism here is socialization. From a very young age, boys are taught that showing fear or sadness invites victimization in a competitive hierarchy.
So they just repress it.
Right. The men in this therapy group were desperate to heal. They were practically begging for connection, but they were terrified to show the very vulnerability required to achieve it.
That's heartbreaking.
It is the terrible hidden cost of the rigid codes of masculinity. Men are actively denied access to the full spectrum of human emotion.
Living with a three-note emotional range. It's like being asked to compose a grand, complex symphony on a piano, where all but three keys have been deliberately smashed with a hammer.
That's exactly what it feels like.
You just keep hitting the anger key over and over again because it's the only one that still makes a sound. She actually wrote this devastating line about this realization. She said, "There is a time in a boy's life when the sweetness is pounded out of him, and tenderness and the ability to show what he feels is gone."
That observation is central to the entire experiment. The sweetness isn't naturally outgrown, it is pounded out. It is a learned, violently imposed behavior.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't. Now, Vincent did encounter one archetype that pushed back against the system: the men she met in a Catholic monastery.
Oh, God.
She spent time there as Ned and found a contemplative, disciplined masculinity. These men, whom we can call the monk archetype, found peace and community by operating entirely outside the aggressive competitive provider system.
So, alternative ways of being a man do exist.
They do exist, but they are often sequestered far away from mainstream society.
But for the men living in the mainstream, and for Vincent playing the role of a man in the mainstream, the sheer weight of maintaining that performance is just unsustainable. I mean, you can't play a broken piano forever without eventually going deaf to your own music.
No, you can't.
The psychological friction of carrying two identities in one mind finally took its toll. The constant deceit, the hypervigilance of watching every word she spoke, and the suffocating emotional repression caused Vincent to suffer a severe nervous breakdown.
It broke her.
She literally began to lose track of whether she was Norah or Ned when she woke up in the morning. She had to end the 18-month experiment early just to survive mentally.
The mechanism of that breakdown is fascinating and tragic because she spent 18 months actively suppressing her own emotional range, her own empathy, to match Ned's required stoicism.
Just burying herself alive.
Yes. The cognitive dissonance of denying her core identity fractured her psyche. The breakdown is the ultimate, undeniable proof of her central thesis. The traditional performance of masculinity is not an inherent biological state.
It's a performance.
It is a deeply unnatural, exhausting performance that requires constant, draining effort to maintain.
So what does this all mean? This brings us to the ultimate question. We have to talk about the concept of male privilege, because Vincent went into this project fully expecting to confirm that men simply have it easier.
And what did she find?
Well, her final conclusion is much more nuanced than that. She acknowledges that male privilege absolutely exists. As Ned, she experienced it. She was taken more seriously in the workplace by default.
Right.
She could walk down the street at night without the constant lingering fear of physical harassment. But that privilege comes wrapped in a nightmare. She wrote, "Every man's armor is borrowed and 10 sizes too big, and beneath it, he's naked and insecure and hoping you won't see."
That armor is the perfect metaphor to visualize the privilege paradox.
Privilege paradox.
Yes, the armor of privilege protects you from certain societal arrows. You aren't physically objectified in the same way, and you are granted a baseline of default authority. But the armor itself is so incredibly heavy, so restrictive, that it slowly, inevitably crushes the person trapped inside it.
Wow. It forces you to ask, is privilege truly a privilege if the primary cost of wearing it is that it isolates you from your own humanity?
If we synthesize her findings, Vincent isn't saying women don't suffer, or that women's grievances in society aren't valid.
Of course not.
She didn't invalidate the female experience at all. What she did was uncover the vastly underreported, hidden suffering of men.
Yeah.
She discovered that men don't necessarily have it better, they just have an entirely different, equally crushing set of problems. And because their specific problems revolve around emotional isolation and the systemic inability to ask for help, their suffering remains largely invisible to the rest of us.
Which brings us all right back to you, listening to this deep dive right now. If you have a husband, a boyfriend, a father, a son, or close male friends, Vincent's journey has the power to radically shift how you view their behavior.
It really does change your perspective.
When they are silent, when they are gruff, or when they retreat into the garage or the bowling alley, it's not necessarily because they are emotionally empty or disconnected.
Yeah.
Often that gruffness is a meticulously constructed defense mechanism.
Exactly.
They are trying to protect deeply held sensitivities that society has told them they are absolutely not allowed to express.
Empathy is the only way forward. Understanding the other side, truly trying to see the world from behind their eyes and recognizing the weight of their armor is the only way to bridge this gap.
We have to try.
We do. If we just stay in our entrenched camps, judging a clumsy performance without ever understanding the immense pressure causing it, nothing will ever change.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, from the auto body shop fear of the bowling alley to the hidden desperation of the strip club, all the way to the devastating exhaustion of the dating market.
It's been quite a journey.
But there is one specific thought from Vincent's deeply personal undercover experiment that I want you to mull over as you go about your week. We talked about how society brutally pounds the sweetness out of young boys to prepare them to wear the heavy armor of manhood.
Right.
If we finally acknowledge that this rigid emotional starvation isn't a natural biological state, but a learned, imposed behavior, what would happen if we simply stopped the pounding? Who those boys grow up to be if we just let them keep their sweetness?
That's a beautiful question to leave on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll catch you next time.